Hello, and welcome to Workplace Stories, the podcast where human capital experts share their real-world experiences and insights. Hosted by Red Thread Research, Workplace Stories surfaces the latest industry trends, innovative talent strategies, and best practices for success. Tune in for practical advice on how to best transform your workplace.
Welcome to Workplace Stories. I'm Danny Johnson.
And I'm Stacia Garr.
And today we had the pleasure of talking with Michael Noble, who is the Vice President of Academic Program Development at Western Governors University. What stood out to you, Stacia?
I didn't quite know what to go in with because Michael's a different type of guest than we've probably ever had, I think. And so the first thing that stood out to me was directly related to what he said, and the other two ahas I had as he was talking. So the first one was how WGU is really, it's focused on being what he called an AI native university. He then acknowledged the jargoniness of that. But what I thought was remarkable was how AI is being integrated into the teaching itself. He talked about virtual assistants for students. He talked about inflow, personalized learning feedback, and AI-assisted evaluation, obviously with human oversight, but those three things. So that was kind of a cool to see sort of thing. But the two insights that I came away from with the conversation were this. The first one was around this discussion we've been having about entry-level talent coming into organizations, and that if AI is going to do a lot of that work, how are we going to upskill folks? And so Michael talked about the way that WGU is partnering with different universities to make sure that folks have the appropriate skills. And the light bulb for me was, maybe what the future looks like is that as part of corporate university partnerships, there are more internships than there ever were before, because that's an opportunity to get those folks that training, that repetition, etc. The organization, while it has to pay them something, does not have to pay them the full salary. And then when folks move into the workforce, the expectations that they come into are higher than what would have historically been an entry-level job. So I could actually see all the incentives aligned in a way that makes sense to solve this problem. And I don't know that I've ever thought deeply enough before or seen a solution before that could do that. So that was my first aha. And then the second aha was we had one of our perennial topics, the discussion about the value of a liberal arts education versus a technical education. But the reason we keep having this conversation is because something came out new, at least for me. And that was this idea that maybe skills have different temporal application timelines. And so we talked about how I think Michael gave a stat that something like half of Fortune 500 CEOs have liberal arts degrees, and that the skills you learn in liberal arts degrees are long-term and durable. And then I made the point that that's great. I have many liberal arts degrees, but I came out of college feeling like I had no skills to get my first job, which is something that maybe a technical education provides better for you. And so this idea that there are some skills you're going to need for right now in the moment to get the job or to do the job immediately. And then there's these longer term skills that you'll always apply, but they'll become more important as you progress through your career. That kind of difference way of thinking about skills was something that hadn't occurred to me before, and definitely wouldn't have gotten there without this conversation.
Yeah, he talked a little bit about this idea of interweaving skills. So it has always been sort of this discussion that you and I have had that it's either liberal arts or it's an engineering degree. You talked about the sort of temporal nature of skills. Some are immediately useful, some need to be developed over time, and they will serve you in the long run. The thing that I find interesting about some of the work that he's doing at WGU is he's trying to weave those two things together. So he understands the durable skills, and he's weaving it into the curricula as people are learning how to code and all of those other good things. Anything else stand out to you?
I think the other thing, and we had talked about this moment, we've talked about this in other formats, is around expertise capturing. And I think you wanted to share some thoughts on that because it's interesting.
Yeah. So we were talking about the future of the L&D team. So as you mentioned, WGU and the curriculum department that he oversees is really focused on AI and what AI can do. And he said that in the past, he's had a team where everybody has a very unique skill set and they all work together to deliver the thing. Like I write the text and this person does the graphic design and blah, blah, blah. He said with AI and with some of the tools that are available now, people can be more generalists, more augmented generalists in roles. So I thought that was interesting, but he still doubled down on the idea that expertise is needed. Just because something looks good doesn't necessarily mean that it's ready. And we see a lot of this in our own team. It looks good. Then when you start digging into it a little bit, you're like, wait. Something isn't right here. We need to fix that. I think the other point that really stood out to me was capturing more value from L&D before optimizing for headcount and efficiency. We're seeing a lot of layoffs right now, but I don't know that we have optimized L&D teams to provide the best outcome that they can before we start just chopping people out of the organization. Anyway, Michael is a dear friend of mine. He's also one of the most interesting people that I've ever met. The conversation was varied and very full of liberal arts stuff. It was a really fun conversation. You should listen to it and tell us what you think. And if you like it, tell your friends and visit us at redthreadresearch.com. Hey, Michael, thank you for being with us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
To start, Michael, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do, what your role is?
Certainly. I mean, this is the obligatory start. It shouldn't necessarily trigger a micro rumination for me on identity, but it always does. So I'm going to start with work. At WGU, I lead design and development of our centralized curriculum. We support WGU's 4 schools. We have a school of tech, a school of education, a school of business, School of Health, the Levitt School of Health, and Gen Ed. Before WGU, I spent, the majority of my career as a vendor in various roles, from instructional designer to operations, sales, marketing, every aspect. It's interesting because so many different jobs and always feel like I'm doing the same role, which is leading to that future state. And that's something I'm super passionate about. So I think in terms of about myself, it's pretty boring. I'm a dad to humans, cats, dogs, plants, a frankly unreasonable number of books, really trying to make book dad a thing. I think that could take off, but yeah, that's me.
That's awesome. Michael actually gave me the coolest wedding gift ever. Michael and I have been friends for years. He gave me books. He gave me about 12 books that I have read about half of them. I thought that was the coolest wedding present ever. I never would have thought of that. It's awesome.
It leads us nicely into the question, which is, why should folks listen to you, Michael?
I like to think that I'm a bit like Cassandra from Greek mythology. I'm cursed to see what's coming and doomed to have no one listen to me or believe me. So I have a few prophecies to share, but seriously, I think I have a really interesting vantage point, which is, I lead a team of around 200 people that's building curriculum for the largest online university in the country. We have about 190,000 enrolled students. And I'm sitting at this intersection of how a major institution builds learning. Relevant, workforce relevant is one of our priorities. Practicality is in our DNA, and that's changing underneath us. And I think it's a useful place for me to do my prophesying. So I usually am like, don't listen to me, let's dialogue. But listening's part of dialogue.
I like it. We're definitely going to dialogue. I am betting that within the first 3 minutes, we're completely off script, just so you know. But yeah, this should be a fun conversation. Maybe to open it up a little bit, in your LinkedIn profile, when I went to grab your link, it says that you refer to yourself as an education change maker. What does that look like? What do you mean by that?
So a few years ago, and it's probably not a trend anymore, right? It was this trend on LinkedIn to put the job you wanted or what your aspirational job title would be. And I'm super lucky because my aspirational job title is so close to what I actually get to do on a daily basis. Now, none of us fill 100% of our time with that thing that we really want to do, but I get to do it a fair amount. Higher education has evolved. This was true even before I moved into higher ed. there's this thing that is particularly challenging in higher ed, which is we like to talk about something that's sticky in a positive way. The model of higher education has been sticky in a way that doesn't serve learners, has stopped serving maybe our culture. It's ripe for change. I feel like WGU is on the leading edge of that and can continue to be. And I'm so excited to be a very small part in that. And that like fits into this other like little bit bigger thing of learning, knowledge, expertise, given AI, which, yeah, we've talked too much about it, but it's so relevant and all that's in flux. And I don't want to watch that happen. I want to be a part of it.
That's cool. I do not live in Utah, nor have I ever. So I am to some extent a little bit less familiar with WGU than Danny is. So can you give folks a bit of a sense of who and what WGU is and how it's different than other institutions, particularly around that focus on competencies that I know you all have?
Yeah, because part of your audience, I'm imagining, is like, well, why should I listen to this podcast about higher ed when I'm a leader in corporate HR or L&D or, in this enterprise context? I'm biased. I think this is incredibly relevant. I think the history of WGU helps point that out. WGU was founded in 97 by 19 Western governors. So not just Utah, not just Salt Lake, 19 Western governors, and not by academics. These governors were coming together to solve a problem of opportunity and of economic mobility. That is not the problem that most institutions of this kind are designed to solve. And we're trying to fill a real gap, that of the working adult who has some college and has been on their journey and they need to finish their degree, or maybe they want to go to the next step in their career. Traditionally, that was the gap that we were filling. That's changing, but that's in terms of the history, the legacy of what we bring, that's it. And students at WGU were online, they get a lot of support. It's not just online modules. They have access to instructors, one-on-one and cohort-based learning. They have mentors. They've got, but here's the difference. It's psychometrically validated competencies instead of an instructor's grade. And there's no underselling that difference because it's okay, no credit for participation, no credit for showing up to class, no credit for just doing the work. It's no, you need to demonstrate competency, whether you do the course materials or not. It is adaptable that way. We call our students night owls because they're filling in the evenings and weekends, working around their family. I was at a graduation ceremony in Louisville on Saturday, and I'll get weepy if I tell you about just the experience of sitting on stage and listening to all those names. And they're stories of resilience, but they're also stories of opportunity. And the percentage of our students that 7 out of 10 feel yep, I've got more opportunity. I've got more mobility now. We're doing pretty good when it comes to the Gallup polls. Yeah.
That's awesome. As somebody who went to night school for 3 hard years, and also I taught in community college, I can certainly appreciate the incredible stories of folks who go through institutions such as yours.
Can we talk just a second, Michael? This is not on the script. I think we're about 3 minutes in, about competencies. So you've formed the way that you run this university around competencies or around skills rather than around, as you mentioned, a grade or a class. We're seeing this a lot in organizations as they try and figure out what skills their individuals in those organizations have. I'm wondering how you deal with that. How does it look like as you're taking a course? How are you evaluating, et cetera?
Yeah. So I know it's hard to tell from looking at me, but I've had a long career and to say that I was a little jaded about the whole dialogue around skills and competencies and all of that. So not an understatement. It's caught up in taxonomies, or it's self-reported, or we have these elaborate technologies that are going to fill it in and they never deliver on the promise. And so I roll at WGU, okay, competency-based. The part of that was obviously most appealing to me was the opportunity it creates to demonstrate that. And as I've learned more about the assessments, it becomes more real, right? And the process and the rigor that's applied. Now, it's not perfect, but we're not done. We're working on so many cool things of like, okay, this is how we're going to take that process and make it data informed. This is how we're going to enrich the skills data we're bringing in from our vendor partners, our own research, the external subject matter expertise that's always part of our process, which is so unique, right? That we have workforce people in the process of creating an academic curriculum, and that we can take those skill clusters, and I use this word that probably is poetic, and it should be like not poetic, right? It should be descriptive of what's happening. I call it dimensionality, which is a list of skills doesn't do much, but if I know, subordination, primary, secondary, context, what are we doing with the skills? There's a way in which I can take that pool of skills data, I can take the pool of data on our student segments, and we can create a data-informed, personalized solution for them that helps them do more than just like, oh, it's not just I took this assessment. Or if you stretch it even further, it's like, well, why is it bounded by the university? Why can it only take place here? And I look at, okay, if we have a model for direct assessment or continuous assessment, we can bring value to our corporate partners. And we're just starting that. The partnership part isn't that new or innovative, but I'm going to use an example, if it's okay, just because I'm self-conscious about the relevance to those of the audience that aren't in higher ed. And I want them to know, I think this might be relevant for you. So like we recently launched a program with CVS Health. 40% of their pharmacy technicians aspire to be pharmacists. That's not an easy, there's not an easy path for them because of money, because they have a job, all those kinds of things. We partner with CVS, create this program that creates this opportunity for them to be able to advance in their career. It's the partnership with the market. But then imagine that we have tools in place so we know where each of those pharmacy techs is. That's what we're working on now. So that when they go in, they are going to go in and it is going to be personalized for them because it's competency-based. They're filling in the gaps of what they already know. We can make that even more immediate. And the value of that is like someone that maybe didn't aspire or didn't think they were ready or see, oh, I've got to go do this high stakes assessment. And we don't talk about, as a special ed kid myself, things like high stakes assessments. They're not a great tool. They're not a great tool for measuring skills in education. They're not a great tool for measuring skills in corporate. That's a very long answer, Danny, but that's the digression that you started it anyway.
Yeah, no. I think this is interesting because, as you know, in academia, mostly everything is pen to paper sort of exams instead of skills assessments. And as you get into grad schools, some of that assessment is much more hands-on and demonstrate the skills, et cetera. I'm wondering how you scale something like that. Because, I mean, in traditional academia, right, we're chunking people through undergrad using the same old systems because they're efficient in a way. How are you doing that at scale?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And there's two answers to it. There's the current state answer and there's the future state answer. As WGU has grown, we have almost 10,000 employees, which shows you, oh, wow. They have this tech focus, but they're still growing a large number of employees for a university. Some of your corporate clients are going to be like, well, that's small. In higher ed, that's big. That means we have a lot of evaluators and thousands of evaluators and thousands of instructors. That pool is big. There's a couple different kinds of assessments. There's more than a couple. There's lots of different kinds of assessments depending on what's most relevant. If you're preparing for some certification in the School of Health and that path is multiple choice style assessments or has 7 different question types, we're going to prepare you to be successful on those kinds of certification exams. But really, we want to get job-like relevant, this performance assessment could double as a demonstration to your employer of your skills so that you're leaving with a portfolio that evidences, because the degree signals certain things to your employer, but doesn't necessarily signal skills competency, even in a competency-based environment like ours. So then it's like we scale it with people, and now we're scaling it with technology. Human in the loop, of course. A rubric is a thing that AI can understand and apply and flag and serve up those things so that the high value interactions of the humans in the process are really benefiting students. And yeah, there's pushback right now. There's all kinds of discussion going around about that. But I'm focused on the opportunity it's creating, and we can create a low-cost experience for our students that brings them real ROI.
I have a question that's also not on the list, but I know one of the things we've been seeing is a move towards kind of greater university and corporate partnerships in terms of kind of the skills and the learning that's happening within the higher education to get folks more prepared for their first steps in corporate America. Can you talk to us a little bit about, one, in what ways does WGU do this? Two, if you do, in what ways do those partnerships influence the types of skills that you're seeing? And then three, a triple-barreled question, has this changed meaningfully in the last, let's call it 3 years with the advent of AI?
So yes. So here's some examples on it's like, so I mentioned CVS. I'm going to use that one really quickly just because it's like we didn't already have the pieces we needed for that. We built those to suit that particular need. The other thing I'll say is you mentioned that starting experience, and it hits on a couple of things because I described traditionally WGU was the night owl working adult thing. And you just described getting your first job or the high WGUs. As we look at our student segments, it's now 40+% that no college credit coming straight out of high school. We weren't designed for that. And so we don't have, or haven't had until recently, until the last 3 years, like the way to scaffold, the way to provide them with that footing, the ways to help them build social capital and networking. I'll use this example of internships because if you have an internship, that's the path to being able to get your first job. And this data I'm going to cite right now is a little bit dated. It's 2024. If you look at, there were some 8.6 million students that wanted internships. Only about 4-point-something million of those students were able to get internships. The students who did not get internships, they look a lot like WGU students. First generation college, they don't have the social capital or network, lower income. And that is like, how are we going to give them, if that's the thing that's going to help them bridge and really create opportunity, we want to give them that kind of advantage. And I say that kind of advantage because giving them that exact thing may be a little tricky at the scale that we operate. And so it looks like, yes, traditional internships, yes to micro internships, piloting and working on virtual or simulation-based externships. I think there's room in there for the partnership thing that you mentioned, where we want eager to partner with corporate and, hey, let us build a pipeline for you. Let's give them a branded, whether they go to your, being able to say, I have that experience. It contributes to that evidence or that artifact that they take with them, that in our context, it's like they upload that to something called an achievement wallet. They build that as they go through their WGU experience, and they're more ready to make that transition than they would otherwise be. And I've probably wandered from your question, Stacia, so if I did, redirect me, but yeah.
I have sort of maybe a follow-up. I think it's interesting that you're talking as if you have a bleeding heart, which I know you do because I know you. But basically, WGU has a mission, right? Like it was created with a mission. It probably still has that mission. We're trying to level the playing field in some way, shape, or form for people who need a little bit of help there. When I think of my college experience and probably most people's traditional university experience, the things that I learned there were sure skills and knowledge that were taught in the classes, but there was also a network that I built. There was also sort of the context. There are resources associated with university networks. And so I'm wondering, like, how are you all replicating that to make sure that your students are coming out with the same opportunities of those that go to a traditional university?
Yeah. So I'm super excited about this. I'm going to create a contrast. I have a daughter. She's going to WashU Law in St. Louis. They've done such a great job setting her up. Oh, your first day, and they're helping her set up her LinkedIn profile. She's got this beautiful banner of the law library. They dressed her up like a mini Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And since then, they've supported her on an internship with the Midwest Innocence Project, with the ACLU. This summer, she's working with the California Appellate Project. She is going to leave with every advantage. And that is the kind of thing that a privileged kid at an elite school can leave with. And that's really hard to give 200,000 enrolled students, or how we're going to do that, or how do you build that social capital? And I'm really grateful for my daughter because she has no social capital from me because I don't talk to people outside of work. But at WGU, we recently hit 500,000 in terms of our graduates. That is a network that can be deployed of people who mirror and look like those students that are looking for those connections. And people are super generous. We have ways, and we've already launched them and piloted them, and we're interested in scaling them, of this is how we help them ask a graduate. This is how we help them connect with those people who are working, who went to WGU. Fortunately, I love how enthusiastic our alumni are about this. The rate at which their family, their friends, they come and do a WGU degree, the fact that they do their bachelor's and then they do their master's, it's super high. And that, leveraging that network of WGU graduates has enough scale to actually be leveraged for something like building social capital. This is new, right? We haven't done this historically. I'm super excited about it. And it's part of the answer to your question, Danny.
I like that. I've been talking a lot. Why don't you go?
So, Michael, I want to ask you a question about some of the challenges you all are facing. And specifically, want to phrase it as, what do you think the biggest challenges are for both academia and organizations today, in this moment, this AI moment we're in, when it comes to employee development?
Yeah, so academia, especially traditional higher, I'll zigzag between corporate and academia. In traditional higher ed right now, it's no secret that there is a crisis. I've started reading the Chronicle of Higher Ed just in my role, and I'm like, wow, is there any good news in the world? But it's like, the big thing is relevance. Is this still relevant? It's being challenged. And some of that, I don't know that I necessarily like or agree with the kind of anti-intellectual winds behind some of that, but some of it's entirely deserved. And yes, we need to be relevant. And I mentioned that sticky thing before. So it's like, does what you learn actually connect to the world of work? And if you ask many people, they will tell you it did not. It did not connect. And it's interesting because I think that's the problem we're built to solve. I've told you about our history. That is some of the things we're changing. What I think this looks like in terms of development is a little bit about that. Our decisions are driven by real market and skills data. It's not just what we teach, it's how we teach it. It's hard for me to talk about employee development right now without talking about how the entire notion of roles, job descriptions, skill sets is changed. So there's a couple of things going on with that. One of them is we have had this sense of a mindset, a skill set, a tool set, and semantically they overlap in ways that maybe aren't useful. But there's this sense of which you study something and then you go do that thing, or even at work, we focus on that tool set even more than the skill set, at least not the durable skill set. There may be a technical skill set, but then I start putting that on the tool set side. There's this thing in which there's portability in the mindset and the durable skill set, and there's not so much portability in the toolkit or the technical skill set anymore. And it's because it's changing every few months. That seems to be the biggest challenge for me in terms of employee development, is by the time I get my stuff together in order to be able to have that big upskilling conversation. My mind's changed about what it should be or how to achieve it. And to me, this comes down to like, how do you scale things like that? And the model of standardization that we have had is no longer going to serve us. And a principle based, like, I don't know that we know how to scale in any other way, but we've got new tools for it. And I think that's the challenge we have to tackle. So it's like, the standardization is slow. It gives us one thing. It's possible to do, and I hate this term mass customization because it still has the mass word in it. That's a manufacturing term. And so it fights what I'm trying to say because it still assumes, oh, we're still going to manufacture, but we're just going to, I don't know, make it more custom at the end. And I think it's a bigger transformation than that. And somehow in our employee development, it has to be around those principles, the flexible, durable skill set, right? That's going to help them not feel threatened, but see this super exciting opportunity that they have in front of them. I can go on this one for a while because I'm rehearsing work that I need to do with my team. I think in corporate, it is this, I see the same thing, or I saw the same thing before I changed, which is we have built our model in large organizations for scale is let's get it right. Let's do the same thing everywhere. Variation be damned.
Yeah. So I think it's actually even worse now. There's always been sort of that chasm between what you learn in school and what you do on the job. But now in a lot of organizations, that first level of work that we used to use to train people and give them context and let them practice judgment and all that kind of stuff, now that's being done by AI. And so people are coming into organizations, if they can get into an organization, given that a lot of those frontline jobs are going away, they're being asked to perform at this level, even though they haven't developed any of those other things that they would have developed by doing some of that frontline work. I'm wondering from an academic standpoint, does that concern you? Do you see it? Talk to me about that a little bit.
I totally see it, right? Because it's like, I'm like, how would I have learned to do this level of work with an AI partner if I hadn't had my whole career behind me to give me all that background and context? And I look at how am I going to scale that level of, in all humility, you've got a lot to learn there, but how do I scale that? Let's call it, at WG, we have a leadership principle called sound judgment, which is usually applied to how we work with other people, right? That's one of our 14 leadership principles. It's interesting to think of applying our leadership principles to AI and what we're bringing there. And it's like, we can lead it or we can let it lead us. And it sounds like, I don't know, it sounds a little like a theme. But what I mean by that, it's much harder to achieve because at where we are, it's much easier for individuals, I think, to achieve that efficiency than it is to scale that. I think that everybody's struggling with that.
I'm also wondering if liberal arts educations actually serve people better now than educations like my own. You know what I mean? So you all both have liberal arts and you learn how to make those connections and all of those types of things that help you sort of like do it on the job. I had a very rigorous yet rigid academic experience, and I don't know that I came out of school with those skills.
Well, it's interesting. This is actually what I was going to say, which is that there's almost a temporal aspect of this in terms of when the skills are applied. In that, like when you came out of your engineering education, you had a very clear set of skills that would apply immediately to designing cars at Ford or whatever it was that you wanted to go on and do. For me, when I graduated, I could do all the things we're talking about. I could do the pattern recognition. I could synthesize information. I could do all that stuff. And, and everyone's like, the world's your oyster. I'm like, yeah, but like, I just need to work. I just need to get started. And so if you're talking about like the long-term durability of the skills, yeah, they're durable as heck. But when I was 23 trying to find a job, I felt completely unprepared, overwhelmed, couldn't find people who wanted someone who could just think and write and do the stuff. But so it's like the skills served me well in the long run, but in the short run, it was very hard. And what I think I heard you say, Danny, without putting words totally in your mouth, is like your skills served you really well in the short run, but maybe not as well in the long run.
That's an interesting observation. Yeah. How are you thinking about that, Michael, as you're preparing people for the workforce?
So I love this question. It's a pet area of mine. As someone who, did my PhD, anyone that knew me then would be like, what are you doing at WGU and how can you do that? And I'm like, I would have been the art for art's sake champion. And I'm saying applied humanities, applied social sciences. There is a way of leveraging philosophy and ethics and like rhetoric and things that we, and we're starting to ask ourselves those questions at WGU, and we're asking them in a couple of ways. It's like, where do we go from here? But there's also this sense of, and I'm going to comment on it, there's an increased awareness that giving you the technical skills is not enough. And so there's this interleaving. Everybody probably knows what interleaving is, right? Which is like, oh, we're teaching you this, but we're going to layer on. You're going to learn communication while you learn to, I don't know, create this project plan or tell your colleague what you just did when you coded this Python app or something like that. And this goes to the whole, like, there's this argument about critical thinking or whatever. It's like, I'm fine with it being a durable skill that we're gonna interweave this and everything. It's not enough to have the generalist sense of these skills. We also need the depth of the expert in these skills, right? And we don't like to think of them, as a binary of like, oh, you're a good communicator or you're not. And it's like, everybody needs to be a good communicator. And then we also need master communicators because there's jobs for all of those people. And the way that we have previously thought of education in the humanities, and it's been in decline for decades. It's like, I probably went at the peak when there were a ton of us and we're all lined up to study that. Maybe this is my Cassandra moment of like, this is what we need. This will also save our culture, right? Because it will teach us to be good citizens of our community and it will help people value each other. And it is vigor, but it also creates opportunity because if I look at, more than 50% of the jobs in AI are not going to be technical jobs. And if you look at, I can't remember the percentage of the Fortune 500, and the data point was last time I looked at, it's like, I had to triangulate between several things. A significant number of Fortune 500 CEOs are liberal arts majors. And that's not the narrative our culture says. It's like, that is not good. That is not. But to Stacey's point, it's pattern making. It's art. Know how to create an argument, know how to show evidence, know how to persuade others. And yes, everybody needs those skills in a durable skills way. And I think we really need experts in those things, and we're not investing in that.
On that note, let's move on to our lightning round. These are questions, Michael, just to get our audience to get to know you just a little bit better.
Okay.
And I think I have got the first one. And it actually ties in beautifully to what we were just discussing, which was, what subject do you wish was taught in every school?
So yeah, it's not going to be surprising that I'm going to choose like ethics, blah. It's like we spend so much time teaching people how to do things and almost no time on how to think well or decide. And I don't think it's an either or with STEM. We have to help. We've maybe overcorrected a little bit, but the problem is we were never doing either in a correct way. So it's not a going back or a correction. It's an invention of how we can't let that gap continue to grow.
I like it. If you could know the answer to any question, what would it be?
So I think the persona I've presented in this is way too lofty, but this answer is like, I am fascinated right now by the nature of consciousness and the speculation on non-local consciousness. And I would love to understand. The question lately that I've been thinking about a lot and reading a lot about is non-local consciousness. That's one I would love to have answered.
What is that?
For those of us with engineering degrees, what is?
It's this theory that our consciousness, and there's some scientific research around this, that it does not reside solely in our own head. And that starts getting a little bit woo-woo, a little bit, and I'll confess, I'm into meditation, I'm into some of those things. It's part of why I'm interested. I read a lot of space opera and these different kinds of organized hive minds and models of cognition and sentience. It's one of the things I love.
I've definitely gone to Wikipedia on non-local consciousness. Just saying. All right.
It's a rabbit hole.
Yeah, I can already see that. Thanks, Michael. All right. Then would you rather read the end of every book or always forget the story's ending?
So I don't really get a choice on this one. I always forget the ending anyway. So the universe decided for me, or my own bad habits of like, for me, it's like the longer the novel, the better, because I'm not racing to the end. I don't want to leave that world or that story or that speculation. So I don't mind forgetting the ending. I already do it anyway.
I can't even imagine. Like, I get to the last third of a book and I go into full on tunnel mode. I'm like, get away, children, family, work. I am finishing this thing because like I want to find out the answer. And it's like a drug. So I can't imagine not racing.
Is it sticky for you, Stacia, though? Do you remember it? Like a year later, do you know what the ending was?
Usually. But here's why. Because I race to the end and then I finish it and then I go back to the last 15% and I reread it slowly to make sure it sticks. Because I know the answer. I've had my questions satiated, but then I can like enjoy and relax into the details. So nobody else does this?
Fascinating.
I do not.
Fascinating.
Wow. This is why we have podcasts. We talk about these things.
Let's talk a little bit about AI, Michael. You and I had an earlier conversation about maybe some of the things that they're doing at WGU. I would love your thoughts on their views and what it's led to.
Yeah. So our president, Scott Fulsifer, he has been very public about the fact that we want to be an AI native university, right? Now, that sounds a little jargony. It can mean a lot of different things. It means that AI is not bolted onto what we already do, but we're willing to reinvent what we do to accommodate this and leverage this in a way that's going to be best and scalable for our students. And it's not just vision talk. I think there's a lot of like hesitation out there of this is changing so fast. Where do we want to go? But no, we have AI virtual assistants for our students too, especially when instructors aren't available or off hours, or even just those students that I just want the self-serve way for me to get that answer, right? I've got in the flow of learning AI that is specific to the learning experience and the activity to give them personalized feedback. I already mentioned how we're scaling on some of the evaluation that we're doing, that human in the loop. And Scott calls it the principal actors in this, right? I don't like human in the loop because it sounds like we're just like this placeholder cog in a machine thing. And I prefer that leadership moment. And then there's the part that hits me and my team, which is like, okay, if I have a couple of scorecards, one of my scorecards is what are we doing for our students? And the other is how are we leveraging it to reinvent our work ourselves of how we're doing that. We've made some progress there. I will describe our shift being from, oh, these GPTs are awesome for content creation and applying a standard. And to me, I'm going to say, oh, that word standard that you just heard, bingo, problem. Let's look at how we can now apply AI for design, targeting the specific needs, data-driven solutions that are pulling in these data sets, not only on skills, but also on our student segments, also on student performance and what really works. I'm super excited about how you measure quality in that it's typically measured as a standards adherence. Oh, did you adhere to the standard? Boom, 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 boom. Measuring to outcomes and results, that's a lagging indicator. That has always been tricky because it's like, oh, everyone's moved on. What are the metrics? we had this potential to leverage synthetic students to do predictive testing, to have a rubric that's a theory of what works, test that against what's happening, inform that with the lagging indicators, and be able to map outcomes to that prediction and have that get better and smarter over time so that we know what works. And it's not just standards adherence checklist.
If the standards change or can change, what does that mean, right? So meaning that it's kind of like all of our benchmarking data, right? If you change the foundational questions, you're not able to understand performance against over time, et cetera, et cetera. On the other hand, if you don't change the questions, you don't necessarily always keep up with the times. So how do you balance that? We want to be objective and we want to understand performance over time with we want to stay relevant in this interesting moment we're all in.
Now, I had a fancy way of articulating the answer to that question, and it slipped from my mind. But the concept basically is if you have this legacy data on a program, if I can run, and this is an affordance of AI, I can rerun that with the new model and the predictive thing that I was using, and then I can do a comparison that's, this is where we were, this is where we are, this is how they compare to each other. So it's almost I feel like if I can build in a way to go back in time but apply the evolving measurement, it doesn't mean that the data isn't locked in stone. It means that it's contextual to where we are and what it's being compared against. And that it was probably a very circuitous answer, and I haven't accomplished this yet, but I'm super excited about it.
This is a conversation that you and I are going to have later, Michael. I want to dive in on this, but I don't know that it's for the podcast.
I think the synthetic student part is key. And it's we typically would have it be things to Stacia's point, there are things that don't, accessibility, it has to be on there. Yes, it's part of quality. It's not going to do much in this. It doesn't matter in this performance question I'm asking. It's a given that has to be there. And it's not like I'm going to throw out completely the quality checklist of everything that needs to be there in terms of security, in terms of data tracking, in terms of all the enabling functions. But it's just saying I can't focus on every aspect of learning science and what's going to give us the best outcome. I need to know what's working the best in this context so I can amplify that and hopefully, it's not going to be one recipe for every student, but I'm going to know because I'm going to build those synthetic testers based on our segments. I'm going to model it on that same student segment data that I'm going to use to inform design.
Okay. Pretty soon, all those synthetic students can go to WGU and graduate, and we can all stay home.
Yeah, I'll put in work.
So one of the questions that we get a lot, Michael, is how do I reorganize my L&D department with respect to AI? And you all are in the thick of it, and you have the support of your senior leadership. And so I'm curious how it has changed your mindset or how it has maybe influenced the way that you're thinking about what your organization does. And how have you brought your team along to be able to do that?
If we reference really quickly that standardization and machine thing, right? It's resulted in a lot of really niche roles of we do instructional design. This is the assessment developer. This is the instructional technologist. This is the visual designer. They have prided themselves on their expertise in going deep in that specialization. Those single lane jobs, and some of this is me in a theory and not even tested. Well, I have tested it, frankly. The team that I have, where they're ignoring their roles and they're all doing all the jobs and they're leveraging AI, they're moving much faster and having better work. And what I'm saying with that is we can't treat the roles as precious or somehow there's rigor because we've divided a job up. Because as much as that is true in one sense, it's also true that if I'm doing this and this, there's not a lots of fidelity or ideas as it gets handed off or someone else works on it, or the spark of that light bulb thing that happens when you're doing the two things or you're in that creative flow. And a few years ago, I was talking to some people in a past job about like the future of roles in our space. And they were using this learning engineer title, which was they were giving it the title's been around forever, but they were giving it a particular AI flavor that was like, oh, it's a learning expert with this focus on AI. And it's something like that, where there's this generalist skill set. And I'm always like, this isn't rocket science. And you now have better tools to get you the data and all the things. And it goes back to that upskilling in that other part of the job. So I'm thinking like our teams will look different. They should look different. I'm just starting with that. And there is resistance, there is fear, there is AI's full of hallucinations, or I think this is unethical, and I don't mean to demean it. I think there are valid questions in that. I read Brian Alexander, who's this futurist at Georgetown, and I love the different directions that we might go. And I see us at this, it's like, this is one where I'm not sure that my prophecy is going to stick, right? My enthusiasm for this, there are other ways that this could mature and evolve. And I guess it's the work version of science fiction for me to read futurist. But anyway, that gets at the conceptual thing of what you're talking about. In practice, it means, guess what? And I know we're in the early stages, but it's like, oh, can Claude Design really enable you to take your skill set and do this other skill set? What are the tools that are going to enable, if you're using Google Nano Banana, is that going to enable you to do, media in a way that you couldn't before? And putting these in your hands, does that enrich your work experience instead of degrade it? I think yes. Does it give you a new challenge and motivation? I think yes. And it's the value creation thing. This isn't about getting rid of jobs or inefficiency. I'm sure that will come. I don't think that's the wave we're in. There's so much value that has not been captured in the work that we do. And this is any corporate learning expert that thinks, oh, our solution is delivering on its promise at the value. No, we do what we can within the constraints. Now we can do a lot more within the constraints. The value, the efficacy of that is so much more that anyone that's challenging the value, let's solve that problem before we solve the efficiency and headcount problem.
So can I just follow up? And I know we're at time and we should be moving on, but I'm super interested in this because I see a lot of organizations that are being stripped right now. L&D organizations are being stripped. And it is basically kind of what you explained, right? Like if I can ramp up a regular subject matter expert, do I really need the expertise of an L&D team? And is the expertise of an L&D team something that we should be losing, or is it really valuable to have somebody that has those skills and can apply them correctly? Now, I don't know the answer. I'm curious about yours.
Yeah, it's tricky because love my partners. It's very easy for them to sit down with Lovable or with Claude and come, look, I built this thing and look how awesome it is, right? Because there's that impression that it does a really good job of looking final.
But that's sometimes a huge problem, right?
It is sometimes a huge problem. And it's not like it's bad. It's just, I still think there's a lot of work to be done to get it there. And it's that sound judgment expert to take it over that. And it's not saying there's a way to capture, I'm interested in these small language models and knowledge graphs and how I can enrich the skills data I have by working with our human subject matter experts and workforce relevance. And that it's not that it's just don't jump to creating the content, because I can use this technology to better capture your expertise and do the job I need you for, not have you do the job that an expert can. Even though there's a certain degree, like I said, there's a spectrum of skill set there, I still think there's a place for that deeper expert multiplied by AI.
Okay. I think that's where we're going to leave it. Where can people find you and connect with you, Michael?
LinkedIn. I mean, I really don't have I'm pretty analog outside of work. There was I had this brief experiment. It was like mostly a political decision, I think, with Blue Sky, where I was like all excited. And then I got into this extended conversation with one of my favorite writers. And I was like, I don't like engaging with my favorite writers. I'm like, this is weird. But LinkedIn's a good place to find me. And I usually check it occasionally. And that's a good place for us to connect. So,
Michael, it's been a real pleasure having you today. And we're going to wrap up with the final question that we ask every single podcast guest, and we call it the purpose question. And it's, why do you do the work that you do?
So let me give you the selfish answer first, and then my good citizen answer. So the selfish answer is, I get to think. How privileged am I that I get a job where I can think? That I have described myself as a flow state junkie. I love losing track of time because I'm so engaged in the work where I feel like I'm doing something creative. That happens to me at least every week. How privileged am I to get into a flow state? I think that's very healthy for my soul and my being. Surrounded by smart people who challenge my ideas, teach me things I didn't know. Really privileged there. The other reason I do what I do is in here, and this is, I am genuinely troubled by our society and where we are. There's no one antidote to this, but I can't help but think education can move the needle, that it gives people a shot at a self-determined life. It helps them think, it helps them make choices. If I can make even a small difference in that, I think that's time well spent, and that's why I do it.
Good answer.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
You're very welcome.
Thanks for listening. If this podcast got you thinking differently about how work happens, that's what we're here for. We dig into these topics every week in our research and in the Red Thread community. The Red Thread community is a place where people, leaders, and practitioners come together to compare notes, share what's working, and maybe challenge those things that aren't working so well. You can join for free at redthreadresearch.com/membership. Or if you or your organization are ready to go deeper, take a look at our professional and our enterprise memberships. For professional tier, for listeners, you can use the promotional code STORIES, STORIES, for a 10% discount. And if you're a tech provider trying to make sense of this space, our tech consortium is where smart vendors are coming together to learn from each other and from the market. You'll find everything at redthreadresearch.com. I'm Danny Johnson. Thanks for listening and for caring about making work better.
Okay, that's a wrap for this episode of Workplace Stories. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to our podcast so that you can be the first to know about future episodes. For exclusive access to our research, insights, and a vibrant network of human capital leaders, consider joining the Red Thread Research community. Visit redthreadresearch.com to learn more and to take your workplace to the next level.